It was what it was with some other talent too. We mentioned that the perception is that Monty Brown has WWE interest, and so does America's Most Wanted. The Torch would say that Kid Cash is on his best behavior backstage, but quote, he could explode any day now, said the wrestler while laughing. Apparently, Cash is still upset with the way the company is using him, and he's not fond of the push that America's Most Wanted continues to receive. And there's even another report in the Torch that says most of the locker room expects AMW to receive the NWA tag titles at the next pay per view. And one of the more popular theories is, hey, management's going to try to placate them with the tag titles in an effort to get them to resign. And here's a line that I think is just, man, I got to ask about.
Oh, boy.
Wrestlers also laugh at Chris Harris and James Storms behind their backs for the way they act in public places. Quote, there's nothing more pathetic than seeing somebody who isn't anybody trying to act like somebody, one observer cracked. Man, I want to ask you about that, but there's another report about Monty Brown that feels sort of the same thing. Wade writes this. Some of the top wrestlers are making it known they don't want to work with Monty Brown because they feel like TNA is turning him into Goldberg. Quote, no one wants to work 3 minutes and take the pounce, one wrestler said. There's even some wrestlers who sense that the push is going to Brown's head. They say he's still respectful to the other wrestlers, but that he's offered some hints that he thinks squash wins are appropriate. Man, I just love that we got people even complaining about who wins and loses. It's one thing when we're complaining about our pay. I can almost get with that, Jeff. But when Kid Cash, not a tag team wrestler, has a problem with AMW getting a push, and then other guys are like, oh, they're acting like they're big stars and they're not. Who gives a shit? What is any of this? I mean, this seems, I can only imagine from your mentality, this is just childish knitting circle bullshit, is it not?
It's sewing circus stuff. It's truly, I mean, just come on. But oh boy, another saying that I don't want to say we just use it in creative because of, but no, it was somewhat company wide, is that consider the source. Well, we don't know who said that. Okay, my point. Like, if you don't know who's saying they have a problem with Chris and James, that let's either start there or stop there. If you don't even know who's saying it, then we let's go to the source. Who's saying this? And if you got a problem with this or problem with that, and it's just, boy, that kind of stuff. In my morning stoic reading that I had today, Conrad, that was so clear about just the clarity of that goes a long way, man. It goes such a long way. The simplicity of, don't worry about anything other than what you actually can control. Like that nonsense, Connie, Jesus, just silly.
Well, something that's not silly is we've talked a lot today about how you guys are fond of Hector Garza, and he's going to be getting the push of a lifetime, and he's Dusty Rhodes' favorite. Already there's some rumbling about Dusty Rhodes' booking. Nobody's clamoring for you to take the book over yet, according to Wade, but they don't really like Dusty doing it. Quote, you can't have a 55-year-old who knows Texas and the South writing a national product. They need younger writers. Well, one of the apples of Dusty's eye here is Hector Garza, and he finds himself arrested on January 3rd at the Houston airport for drugs. They found 2 types of steroids and some other pills, none of which he had any sort of prescription for. It's not uncommon that wrestlers might be caught with steroids or growth hormone, but when you've got an immigration issue, you got to wonder, oh, is this going to have some other effects? Of course, this winds up coming out to be a misdemeanor, so it's not a huge deal. He's going to post $1,000 bond to be released from jail. But obviously, when you've got, I mean, I feel like TNA's drug testing policy at this point is probably don't ask, don't tell, because drug testing is very, very expensive. And respectfully, I don't know that steroids should have ever been banned in wrestling. I know we'll take a little bit of heat for that, but whatever. What did you, I mean, this has to be a panic moment because you don't want the negative press when you're trying to negotiate television contracts and licensing deals. Anytime one of your stars gets arrested, you know, you're going to have concern. How do you remember hearing this? And were you pretty panicked about it, or did you recognize that's not that big a deal?
I don't remember actually how I heard this news, but Conrad, let me ask you a question here. Mr. Silva, maybe go back to a two shot here because I'm curious. What do you, when I would hear this type of stuff, what do you think the first thing I did or the first call I did?
Conan,
Nope.
Pena,
Nope. Nope. The first thing I would do would
call
uh,
Dallas.
call Dallas
Yeah.
because there's a lens, and some people call it the bubble, but there's a wrestling lens, and then there's a investor lens, and then there's a legal lens, and just all of that. And I can remember just like, all right, explain this to me, what you do and don't know. And I called, and the attorney out in Dallas said, why don't you give me a day? Let me dig into all this because you're going to hear all kinds of stuff. And then the report was, okay, the drug situation, it is what it is. It's not best. There's going to be some bad PR, blah, 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 blah. But the immigration set of circumstances, he's got a CMLL work visa. This may be game, set, match. They don't play with it. It is so far out of hands. We can get immigration attorneys to go to work on it. It's going to be very costly. But Jeff, and then I'm like, my most important thing here was, okay, what does the investor look at? And they're like, hey man, this is going to probably, let's see how it plays out, going to be a dollars and cents because it's going to cost money for the immigration attorneys, if at all possible, to kind of smooth out. And that was, man, from I don't say a personal, but from a creative point of view, or a wrestler point of view, or looking at the roster in totality, it was kind of a ball shot for all of us. We all really liked Hector, had a lot of belief in him. He had a great disposition about him. He could work anywhere on the card, heel or babyface. So that's where it was like, damn, dude. We all hated it for him, and just weren't real sure how this was going to play out.
I got to say, just as a reminder, nothing that Hector Garza was arrested with and he had in his bag, it was all stuff he could get over the counter in Mexico. It wasn't even I'll get it out. Prescription stuff in Mexico. He could just go to the pharmacy and buy it. And listen, this isn't popular, and I know everybody wants to pretend like this isn't the way of the world, but there's a lot of guys when they hit 35 or 40, they start taking testosterone. Some of your favorite wrestling announcers, and I'm talking about Jim Ross, he takes it. He's talked about it on his podcast. So it's not an uncommon thing. Hector's 35. I know he maybe was in front of the curve before this was. I mean, now there's so many men's clinics in mine in your area, Jeff, where you can just go get this. Maybe that wasn't the case back then, but I just don't. This feels like much ado about nothing for me. It ain't like he's smuggling freaking heroin in. He had personal use steroids. That just doesn't seem like a big deal.
But I mean, again, am I accurate in saying the drug issue was a fumble, but the immigration part of it, because
Makes it tougher. Yes.
he got flagged, or however that all works specifically, it was, I'll say this, if American would have got caught with this, it wouldn't have been walking scot-free, but I believe this was a second flag for him, which in immigration circumstances is no bueno.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to ask about. Do you think the issue is, because I realize that a lot of, I can't believe this isn't just common knowledge, but a lot of wrestlers, international wrestlers, come into America to wrestle, and sometimes they don't always use the proper paperwork, Jeff. I don't know if you've heard that.
There's rumor and innuendo as something to wrestle used to talk about.
Yeah.
I have.
But it's a very costly and long drawn out, tedious opportunity to do it the right way. So I guess my concern here is, when you're saying he got flagged, do you feel like TNA hadn't sponsored the work visa? Maybe he had one from a promotion in Mexico. Is everybody sort of pointing the finger on this? Do you think that you got your hand slapped because you weren't doing it the right way here?
No, Hector. Look, CML. You can't say employee, but his work permit. The best I recall was it was going to get us over the hump, but not long term. And we better start working on long term solutions. But I don't think we were there at this point. That he was legal, but we got to figure out a long term solution. We just weren't there yet.
It's written here, while details were not confirmed, it's believed the biggest problem is an immigration issue and not the misdemeanor steroid possession charge, although it is the latter situation that resulted in him spending at least 10 days in Harris County Jail near Houston. It's believed that he did not have the proper working papers, although those in TNA were of the belief that Armando Quintero, who was in charge of that, had taken care of that some time back. Garza had been flagged coming across the border for TNA before, and it was an issue months back with TNA regularly bringing in Team Mexico for the X Division Cup shows because all of the Mexican wrestlers were coming in on tourist visas. TNA and Booker Dusty Rhodes had just started a major push for Garza as a Latin sensation babyface like 70s promoters, and the push was going to include scoring a pinfall victory over Scott Hall at the Final Resolution pay-per-view. Man, this is talk about bad timing here. This is just not good at all for Mr. Garza.
No. Can you do on your Google machine? This is 05. Hector's matches in the United States from this point forward. I don't think he returned.
Really?
What year did he pass away?
His last match was in 12.
Okay.
So yeah, he you're right. His last match was December 21st, 2004. My gosh, that was his last.
And I'm not maybe K-Dog or others. I remember it being a lot bigger than people understood. Two flags. Again, Conrad, I'm not an immigration agent. This was, I don't want to call it the death penalty. It was a bad deal. It was a really bad deal for him personally, as far as, because it was going to take all those kind of attorney fees. You know, he had a flag, more than a flag on him. But yeah, so that was his last. Yeah, and you kind of glossed over it. The dude spent 10 days in
10 days.
Ridiculous.
I'll be honest, I didn't realize that was the end. Like
I thought so. And when I was doing the research, I was thinking, man, I wonder if this was, but I kept going on with it. But I was like, I remember that was it for him.
What a career. I mean, if he's not arrested here, you got to think as SmackDown started to lean into, being more aimed toward, hey, we're looking for our next Hispanic star, whether that's Eddie Guerrero or Rey Mysterio or Alberto Del Rio. Like they tried to make SmackDown sort of that show for a long time. And if he would have used TNA as like a coming out party, he shared an in-ring promo with Roddy Piper. He cleared house on Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. He beat AJ Styles, and he was about to pin Scott Hall at a pay-per-view. The sky was the limit for him in America, right?
I'm telling you, when you kind of look at just what you laid out and then some, we'll call it the WCW influx of the luchadors, Psychosis, Hoovy, Halloween, Damien. I mean, there's just those guys all super, super, super fantastic. A lot of them under the mask. There's only one Rey Mysterio, game, set, match. He's truly, silly ass MJF throws around generational talent. He's a buffoon for saying it. Rey is truly a generational talent, but he's a mascot. When you look at Garza as that handsome, good looking, and like I said, he knew how to work heel or babyface. The sky truly was the limit for the dude. I mean, there's no telling what he could have done had he had his big break.
You and I have talked about before, what if, the biggest what ifs in TNA history, and we both sort of landed on Monty Brown. Hector Garza might be up there with him too.
Oh, he's top 5. There's no doubt. It's funny, we've touched on a bit. What if he would have jumped?
Yeah.
I mean,
I do want to talk about that, but before I do,